Right. Well, this shouldn't
although,
take long.
although you're asking the questions, before you do, I would just like to say that as I wrote this book, one of the things that came into my mind again and again and again is, how would Armando play this scene? So thank you.
Okay, well, just with a low underlying scream, I think, because I'm so glad I'm not doing Veep anymore, because I think any attempt to fictionalize what's going on at the moment would not be as absurd or as confusing or as jaw-dropping or as entertaining as what's going on at the moment. When we came out, you say this looks a little bit like a basketball court. It did remind me of those, you know, those when surgeons in Victorian era used to perform, but I feel we don't have the body that everyone wants to look at here with us. But we've got the closest thing to it. So, I mean, you have seen the body, you have seen the Donald up close, haven't you? And I am genuinely, because what we get is this extraordinary, entertaining monster. But is that what you see when you're one-on-one with someone like that?
No, it's incredible. I mean, he doesn't look like, up close, like anyone you have ever seen before. I mean, first thing, he's very, very, very large, and very thick, meaty.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. Over here, thick means a bit kind of...
yes, I mean, I'm sure we will get to that.
Yes. Yes.
But it's this flesh. He is a big guy, and then the head
yes.
with his hair. The hair is when you're with him, it's mesmerizing. You cannot take your eyes off of it, and you're just waiting for it to do something. Yeah.
There's a wonderful quote. You quote Ivanka describing to her friends his daily hair routine.
And so the thing is, first he's entirely bald, 100% bald, and he's had scalp reduction surgery to make the baldness smaller. I never heard of this thing. It was like, I may go in for it.
What is it? Does it pull up the back hair?
And then it does. And then he has the hair is, you know, it's that baldness, you know, the circle.
Yeah.
And it comes here, and everything is pulled up. So the back is pulled up, the sides are pulled up, and apparently there's enough on the front to pull up, and it all meets here. And then there's some kind of iron spray that is put on it.
My God. I mean, so far, he sounds, everything you've described, like a Frankenstein monster. That's just bits of other people stuck together. Personality-wise.
No, and I think, and the people, I mean, Steve Bannon, for instance, who is, in a way, the guy who made Trump president. Yeah. And part of this story is about his disillusionment. And I think he really came to feel this was the monster he created, and that had taken on a life of his own, which he could no longer control.
Yes, as happens, without giving too much away, as happens in Frankenstein. No. Listen, I thought long and hard about, I thought we'd open with some sort of big general questions. I thought long and hard about a big question that I think would sum up everything I felt about. And all I can come up with is Trump an idiot? That is my opening question. And I mean that seriously, because I wonder if he isn't, and if he is actually much, much smarter than we allow.
I think that's the natural progression of thinking, and many of the people around him, they may have thought, I mean, because everybody sort of has this idea of Donald Trump, and that idea is kind of he's an idiot. And then you go through this other thing. And the people around him certainly thought this. He became the president of the United States. Becoming the president of the United States is you know, through the eye of a needle. It's an accomplishment. I mean, it's a pretty special accomplishment. And so everybody came to think, okay, there's something here. And actually, I kind of thought this. Going into the White House, I kind of thought, okay, here's obviously an unrecognizable political figure, a unique political figure, and very a crazy political figure, but maybe this could be a success because maybe he understood something. Mm-hmm. He's an idiot. I mean, he's a total idiot. I mean, it's extraordinary. Here is this body, this incredibly large body, and there's almost not an iota of information in it. He just knows nothing. I mean,
But he takes great pride in not knowing anything. He says he doesn't have to read. He says...
Well, he does. That's partly because he can't read. I mean, there's a big debate in the White House. What is the thing? Is he only semi-literate? And people really, they think that this is a good possibility. Is it just ADD stuff?
Yes.
Gone crazy, or does he just feel I'm Donald Trump? I don't have to read.
Okay. I've got someone who does that for me. I have, and you mentioned in the book how, in order to get something, in order to get his attention, people will summarize and summarize and summarize so that things end up, memos about complex issues only end up being like one sentence long. And the only way to get his attention is to have the words Donald Trump in it. Because as soon as he sees the words Donald Trump, he will read it. He'll take a look at it.
And he won't, and hardly. So even even summaries, he pushes away. And then there's the other thing that people go, they say, okay, this is really, this is kind of complicated, in a kind of a crisis situation when the President of the United States, a job that's really all about information. And so it's a kind of problem when this guy doesn't read. But then they say, but that problem is compounded by the fact that he doesn't listen either.
Yes. Yes, you have. I think you have the devastating thing, which is like the best way to get him to take on your opinion is to be the last person he listens to. But even then, you've got to assume that he was listening to you.
And that there won't be almost immediately another person, another phone call.
Yes, yes. I think we saw it today and overnight with his reaction to the gun laws in the US, and that he met these students and he came away saying, we've got to do something about it. We ought to take guns away from people. And then no doubt he got a call from the NRA and the National Rifle Association of America, and has tweeted, not only have we got to, be careful with guns, but we must arm every teacher in America and actually bring them into schools. And does he get... I wonder if he's like a... not as complex as a goldfish, but in that his attention span seems to be infinitesimally small.
It's even Donald Trump doesn't pay attention because the whole operation is the opposite of that. It is all about getting people to pay attention to him.
Right. Yes.
And in no way in that algebra does this involve a give and take.
Okay, so he is the center of his world.
Yeah, it's sun god-like.
Okay, and is that then a form of, if not an idiot, is that then is he therefore mad? Is it a form of madness that he has?
Well, he's certainly peculiar.
Okay.
And it's yes, I think it must be. Okay.
How easy is it to have a conversation? If you've had a sort of direct conversation, how easy is that?
Yeah, you don't get to have a conversation. Okay. It's all one way.
Right.
And it's dramatic one way. It's first thing. He's full of flattery. So he's a salesperson, and he learned this thing at some point that there is no such thing as too much flattery.
Right.
So this is a kind of a level of shamelessness that he has mastered. You cannot, and this is I think a sort of a profound thing that he came to understand. You cannot flatter people too much. It's a lesson we should all adopt. I mean, the whole world would then really go crazy.
Yeah. But it clearly sort of works from his perspective in terms of, being a successful businessman and The Apprentice, as he keeps reminding us how successful he's been. He's sort of, this is the thing that
well, actually, it's even more interesting that he gets to be successful when he's not successful.
Yes.
I mean, he's not a successful businessman.
Right, but he's able to sell the idea that he's successful.
Absolutely.
So he sells a kind of story. He's a kind of, he's an entertainer. Is that what he's doing? Is he primarily concerned about becoming, the sole subject of any kind of news analysis, comedian stand-up, live event? Does he want to kind of dominate our conversation?
I literally don't think he could conceive of a world in which everyone is not talking about him, and he has achieved that. So during the campaign, I did an interview with him, and I said, because this was then at the moment totally incredible and preposterous that he might end up. It wasn't even in the realm of possibility that he would end up as the president of the United States. So I said, "What's your goal here?" And he said, in a very straightforward way, was no hesitation. He said, "To be the most famous man in the world." And then he said, "I think I may be the most famous man in the world. I think. What do you think?" And I'm going, "Oh," and then he goes, "Jared, am I the most famous man in the world?" And Jared says, "Yes, I think you are."
Now, you've just introduced another exciting character in this, who also fascinates me, perhaps even more, because he comes across as very enigmatic, Jared Kushner. I'm in the middle of casting, I'm doing a film of Charles Dickens' David Copperfield this summer. I'm in the middle of casting Uriah Heep. And I instantly just thought, it's Jared Kushner, isn't it? Because he sort of lurks. We've never seen him speak. I've never even seen him open his mouth. He just lurks, this thin, pale, smiling. He's now in charge of everything.
One of the early campaign managers who got fired, Corey Lewandowski, called Jared the butler.
Yeah.
But I have another way of looking at this. I have 2 older daughters and I have 2 sons-in-law. And there's a kind of thing about when you have a son-in-law, and they want to avoid you. They want to avoid friction around you, so they sort of move around you in a way that, and that's how Jared moves around the president. It's always in agreement. It's always at no friction.
Right. I don't think I've ever seen a photo of him showing his legs. So maybe I do imagine him sort of. But Trump has made him like in charge of Middle East, in charge of infrastructure, everything.
Everything. Well, Trump loves to make other people in charge of everything that might involve having to read something.
Right. Let's just go back to when this all started. You were invited in, or did you ask to come into the West Wing, to the White House, and watch them at work?
This is, it's kind of random how this happened. Maybe the best kind of things in journalism are random. I mean, I had this small relationship with Trump, which went back 20 years. I was the media columnist for New York Magazine, and one of the people that Trump would call up to complain about what had been said about him, or quite more often when something was not said about him.
Right.
Why was he not mentioned in some article? So we got, and he was a perfectly fine fine acquaintanceship. He was actually sort of, he's sort of funny, and the flattery is amazing. And so when he was during the campaign, one of the magazines I worked for called me and said, "Would you interview Trump for us?" And I hadn't really. I didn't think he was going to be the president. I thought that this was just a waste of time. And but suddenly, as soon as the offer was made, I thought, what could it be? I mean, so I actually, he was in California. I went out to California to interview him, and it was sort of arranged that I was going to see him before can't remember the show that he was doing, but some show, and I was going to get 45 minutes. Now I've done presidential campaigns before, and that's what you get. They say, okay, you get X number of minutes, and so I was taken into the room with him by actually this woman who we should talk about, Hope Hicks.
Oh yes, right.
Who's a fascinating character. Anyway,
Hope Hicks.
She
which
was
is
sort
one
of
his campaign.
Yes, she was sort of the intern on the campaign then. She's now the most important person in the country. But so she brings me in and she says, Mr. Trump, this Michael Wolff is here. You have 45 minutes, and his whole face. Something happens to his face, and it's like somebody has startled him with the most extraordinary piece of information. And he says, 45 minutes? You don't give Michael Wolff 45 minutes. Do you know who this is? And then he launches into this thing, which I've now heard he launches in for everyone. He's the biggest, the greatest, the most incredible, the most... I was sold. And in fact, he said, okay, I'm going to do the show, and then you're going to come back to my house in Beverly Hills with me, which was interesting because no one in the whole country knew Trump had a house in Beverly Hills. It's a huge house right on the corner of Sunset and Rodeo, kind of another $30 million bucks.
Yeah.
But I went back there and he said, would you like anything? And he opened the refrigerator, and the refrigerator is filled with pints of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. That's all that's there. row. And then he took one out, and I said, no, I'm okay. But he gave me one anyway. So
because he doesn't listen.
And so we went into this in this living room, which is kind of filled with sort of cast-off hotel lobby furniture, and we sat on these overstuffed things, and we ate from the tubs of ice cream for several hours, and it was a lot of ice cream. I mean, he didn't stop really. I mean, it's 3 tubs at least, and. Then I wrote this piece, and it was. I certainly would not have said that it was flattering in any way. This is the piece. This was 2 weeks before the Brexit vote, and I said, "Well, what's your feeling about Brexit?" And he said, "What?" I said, "Brexit? Huh." And I said, the vote in the UK to leave the European Union. Oh yeah, I'm for that. He said.
That level of sophisticated argument is currently going on now. So he's sort of...
So anyway, the piece came out, and then I got and it was the cover story, and there was a kind of interesting illustration photograph of him, and I got a note from him after the piece came out, and it said, "Cool cover." So I thought, I guess he liked that. I don't know.
So he wouldn't have read the... He wouldn't have read the...
No, he didn't read it. He just saw it.
Saw the cover. But you clearly got access after the election once he was in.
Totally. And then it was... So I was sort of... so during the transition itself, so after he's elected, I was in Trump Tower. I saw him. Congratulate, and I heaped enormous flattery on him. You're the greatest. You're the,
I know it works. That's how I got O.J. Simpson to sign a piece of paper saying I did it. I ran along next to him saying, "We love you, O.J.," and that's when he turned. But it's great. Flattery's great. So just remember that.
So I said, I would like. I figured, why not? I'd give it a try. I'd like to come into the White House as an observer, and he thought I was asking for a job. I mean, he didn't know what the jobs in the White House were, so I was kind of, maybe deputy assistant observer was a job. And I said, no, I want to write a book. And if you've ever seen a face kind of just deflate, like I'm telling him the most boring thing he's ever heard. But he kind of said, okay, a book, break a leg, sure, whatever. And I took that as basically that he didn't say no. And I had been talking to Steve Bannon, and I went back to Bannon, and I said, this is what he said. And Bannon said, sounds good.
What could possibly go wrong? But no, I can understand that. When we were researching Veep, I went out to DC, and politicians are more than happy to offload, to give you time, especially if it involves attention. So they were thinking, oh great, there's going to be an HBO show about us, and we got access. But we were shown around the West Wing, and it became clear to me that people love to say they work in the West Wing. Even if it's a chair like this in a corner of a corridor. I've seen 4-star generals sitting with laptops because, they're offered a whole suite of offices in another building, but they want to go home saying, I work in the West Wing. But it struck me as the sort of place that once you got in, you could hide. Somebody once told me, Washington's about power. If you can find a corner of a room where there's some power.
And you don't even have to, I got this kind of passport into the West Wing.
You had security clearance and...
It was less auspicious than that. It's not that complicated. It's like everybody was sort of told to see me. They had no reason. They didn't know why they were seeing me. I kind of thought, what's anyway. And so you would make an appointment. I mean, the operation was you make I made appointments for the week. Whoever is your first appointment puts you into the system. Mm-hmm. Once you're in the system, you come in off Pennsylvania Avenue, and you're here. There's the White House. There's everything. It's like total access.
Yes.
And then you go in. I would go into the West Wing, and the White House, as you know it, is here, and then the West Wing is literally a wing off of it, where the offices of everybody who works for the president.
And it's a sort of a rabbit warren. It's very small corridors.
Small. It's kind of a shitty little thing. The carpet is stained. It's terrible.
But why? Yes, you got access, but people said lots of very terrible things and very honest things. Why were they prepared to? First of all, what's it like working for Trump? Why do they want to work for Donald Trump? I'm still interested in this pool he has. But also, why did they seem happy to offload as much as they did?
I think, the real plot of this book, so to speak, is what happened to all of these people. So let's say they all go in on day one. They're working for the President of the United States. They're working for someone, no matter how peculiar, who has become the president, who has done this thing. They're in the White House, which is the capper of a career. They're going to all go, nothing bad can happen to them now that they have come to work in the White House. Yes. And I think that was what they all felt on day one: enormous confidence and even enthusiasm. and what I saw was the change here. Confidence and enthusiasm goes to puzzlement, goes to confusion, goes to disillusionment, goes to disappointment, goes to fear, goes to probably incredulity first, and then fear, and then the actual conclusion, this person cannot do this job.
Yes.
And it really is an arc, and it starts fairly quickly. On the first day, Trump exaggerates the size of the inaugural crowds.
Yes.
Not he doesn't double them or triple them. It's 10 times larger than the actual crowds. Then the new press secretary, Sean Spicer, is pushed out to justify this, and that's when he says, it's just suddenly on that moment he thought you can't make this shit up, and then that sort of became his mantra through the whole thing as he became the butt of every joke in America. So this was this other thing that I think that people began to appreciate, is that they were in the White House, and this was going to make them, from a career standpoint, everything indestructible. But actually, the opposite was happening. They were in the White House, and they were every day being tainted by this and diminished by this. And this group of people who have worked during this period in the White House, I think they're now all unemployable.
Right. And heavily in debt, because they've had to hire lawyers, and they've had to get legal advice, and they've had to protect themselves. But that kind of snarl up, that kind of turn from the optimism, I mean, with Obama came in with hope, and it took 2 or 3 years before we were able to really adjust to whether it was working or not, it usually takes a little while to get the measure of a president. But like you say, within the first week, he'd lied about the inaugural crowd. He tried to push it out as fact. He went to the CIA. There's a fantastic point early on in the book when he goes to the CIA on day 2 or day 3 of his presidency, and he gives a speech to his entire intelligence gathering community about how well he did in the election, and the number of the crowds, and how the rain didn't come down when he was speaking, and how it came, and
even more than that, it's incoherent.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a set of sentences here, but no one sentence is connected to the prior sentence.
Yeah. I've got a bit of it here. Hang on. Here we go. So in the middle of his speech, he said, and we had another one yesterday. In the Oval Office, there's a beautiful statue of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I also happen to like Churchill, Winston Churchill. I think most of us like Churchill. Doesn't come from our country, but had a lot to do with it. Helped us, real ally. And as you know, the Churchill statue was taken out. So a reporter for Time magazine, and I've been on the cover like 14 or 15 times. I think I have the all-time record in the history of Time magazine.
And just let me interrupt this. Armando did not write this.
No. James Joyce couldn't have written that. It reads like, it's just and you quite bravely, but quite rightly, just transcribe that speech for 3 pages, because it is frightening.
Well, one of the things when you're a writer and a journalist, you say, okay, there's this speech. I got a quote from it. Give me a quote. So you look for a quote, which is 3 or 4 sentences tops, and you can't do it here. It's just pure. I don't know, poetry.
Not only can't he read and can't he write, he can't speak. Can he think? That's the next question. Can he think? Does he have a strategy? Does he have a plan?
No, he can't think. I mean, in this recent yesterday, this he's obviously struggling on this gun thing. These people have confronted him, and at some level he's processing this, and then he came out with this idea: he's going to every teacher in America is going to be
it's going to stop
wackos.
Wackos are not going to go into school.
So he can't think. This is what he comes up with.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier Steve Bannon, and he's the next character I want to look at, because actually quite a lot of the book is really about the struggle underneath Trump for Trump's kind of ear, really, and it's between, the real struggle is between Bannon and Jared and Ivanka. That's the real tussle that's going on. What's Steve Bannon's, what's his problem? Was he well known in America before? We didn't know anything about him.
Nobody knew. I mean, that's one of the great things about this story. As a matter of fact, I'll give you my Steve Bannon story, because this is... so in February of 2016, I am walking through the airport in Orlando, Florida, to give a speech. For some reason, all speeches in America are given in Orlando. So I'm going, and I'm sort of, not wanting to be there. And anyway, heading through the airport, and I see someone looking at me as though with joy, and I don't know. And then he puts his bags down, and he comes over and embraces me. And says, "Oh my God, you're doing such great work." If you think I'm looking for flattery, I guess it seems like I'm very responsive to it. And I was responsive. I mean, I thought, okay, I don't know, no idea who this person is, but okay. Anyway, he goes on his way. I go on my way, and then about a month later, I see an article about Breitbart. And I thought, that guy in the airport is the Breitbart guy. That's this guy, Steve Bannon. First time I ever heard about him. And then after that, I didn't think about him again until suddenly, in August, he's made the head of the Trump campaign. And so I thought, okay, if he thinks he knows me, then I'll pretend I know him. And I wrote him an email, and he said, yes, come up anytime. And I went up to Trump Tower. I saw him, and then he said, Trump is going to be the president of the United States, and the path to victory is through Florida, Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which, by the way, turned out to be the path to victory. But that was so preposterous that I didn't even write it. I thought, this is just what they say. But in fact, obviously, he won. Immediately thereafter, I called again and went up and he was, and Steve is kind of mesmerizing. I mean, he is a person who believes. He believes in this his vision of this moment in time. He believes, it's kind of like he's a 63-year-old guy who has never held office, never worked in politics, never, much like Trump, by the way. But who is suddenly, just by this incredible fluke chance, given the keys to the White House.
But what he believes is a kind of negative, it's a sort of anarchic, he wants to blow the system up, really.
Total disruption.
Yeah.
Completely, yes. And it's talking to him, because he's a kind of brilliant talker. For me, writing this book, and as he opened up more and more and more, and you suddenly get this completely anarchic description of life in the White House, with an expressiveness that, if you're me and you're listening to this, and he's putting this on the record, your jaw has dropped, and you say, you look heavenward and say, my God, thank you for this one.
It's like Dickens seeing a new kind of character. But he's reading the book, a lot of his, what he was responsible for was a kind of almost like wanting to make mischief, like the immigration ban, the anti-Muslim ban that was enacted 4 or 5 days into the administration. And it was almost done with a sort of glee that people would protest, and glee that people would hate it, and it would cause maximum discomfort.
Right. From Bannon's point of view, much less about who was or was not coming into the country, but the knowledge that liberals would go apeshit about this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like an act of revenge. I mean, a lot of what Trump, to me, does and says is really an act of revenge for Obama making fun of him at the White House the Washington Correspondents' Dinner 5 or 6 years previously.
Totally true. Except Trump's thing is personal, petty slights, and Bannon's thing is like a worldwide vision of revenge and disruption.
So is the world a safer place that Bannon isn't there anymore? Well, at least he could keep Trump under some sort of control.
Yeah, no, and Bannon is, even if you dislike what he says and what he believes in, is an intelligent person, an insightful person, a kind of recognizable book reading person.
Right. Just any book. That's all it takes. I mean, saying that does remind me that the bar has gone so low now. The level of expectation, we were discussing backstage how actually, no matter how terrible Trump's behavior, it doesn't seem to have any impact on his standing with his own supporters or in his belief in himself.
Well, in the famous Trump comment, I mean, a kind of a supreme self-awareness, in a sense, that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and his people would still vote for him.
Yeah. And he said today, I think it's today or yesterday, he said, I may be the first president to have actually carried out more campaign promises than I actually ever made. It's just... But the thing that concerns me is, although that is in and of itself genius in terms of comedy, he is the president. He is the most powerful person in the world. That's what concerns me. I mean, where do you think... Well, let's look at the tussle. Let's look at the tussle before we get to the end game. The tussle between... So clearly, Jared and Ivanka won, and Bannon lost, and they have the... But what struck me reading the book was how a lot of the really big, dreadful decisions were actually the decisions made by his family, made by Ivanka and Jared. The firing Comey as head of the FBI, and then bringing in Scaramouche as head of communications. That was their idea. That wasn't Bannon. That wasn't the mad people.
I mean, you really can't make this stuff up.
I know. So what's their agenda then?
Well, Bannon's point of view was that every decision that Jared and Ivanka got behind turned out to be a disastrous decision. And from Bannon's point of view, it was, the daughter will bring down the father. And, this isn't, Steve has never worked in politics, but at least he's read some books and given some thought about it. Jared and Ivanka are, just get this, these people who don't have one scintilla of relevant experience to this job, not one, are suddenly the most important people in the world.
Yeah.
They go into the White House. They have more power than everyone. They have actually their presence there will wholly disrupt any kind of management logic within the White House because they can basically overrule anybody. They are they are the two most entitled people on earth. And they act like the two most entitled people on earth. And they have, again, there's no basis on which they can proceed with any background and with any foreknowledge.
And the history of the the Trump administration so far, and it is, you have to remind yourself, only 1 year old, is that people don't survive. You know, the turnover has been higher than any 8-year presidency. Are they going to survive? Does Trump, do you think if the chips are down, Trump will in the end fire his own daughter?
I think that there's a pretty good possibility at this point that Jared will be indicted. And so the question, probably the more direct question is will Trump throw his son-in-law under the bus? And then the corollary to that is will his son-in-law throw his father-in-law under the bus? And I think that the answer to both of those questions is yes.
Okay. Well, that's something to look forward to, and no doubt quite soon, the way things are going. So do you think he will survive then? Do you think from what you've seen that we won't get to the end of a first Trump administration?
Yeah, I think we will get to the end of it. When that end comes.
All right. Do you think it will be sooner than 4? I mean, do you see him surviving his 4 years in office?
I think with Trump, even thinking out 4 years is
okay.
It's beyond imagination. But I think you can think out to November. And I think probably between now and November may well be the bloodiest time in this administration.
So that's when it's the midterm elections in November. So that's when a third of the Senate comes up for re-election and the whole of the House of Representatives.
So I think that and I've just my own speculation would be that the special prosecutor, who Trump will invariably try to fire, but I think we may have gone beyond that. I think that's may be difficult, and even if he does fire, that will provoke such a reaction that it will just hasten everything anyway. Mm-hmm. But I think that in July-ish, he returns a report which is a case for obstruction of justice, and that's handed to Congress.
Right, but I do think that those who in politics in Congress who had opposed Trump in his own party, who had said no one like him can represent our party, their silence is deafening in terms of once he became president, their unwillingness to maintain that line and to stand up.
Well,
do you think they will actually find it themselves?
I think that there are two aspects of that. There was, as soon as he was elected, Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, said, "Okay, he's a fool, but he'll sign anything we put in front of him," which has turned out to be true. And the other side of it is that they hate him. I mean, they hate him because he's hateful. I mean, these are, especially in the Senate, some of the most self-important people on earth, and Trump calls them regularly and berates them and insults them and calls them names. They hate him. So that's a kind of thing. At which point do they put the knife in? Right. Which they'll be perfectly willing to do.
And which brings me to the next figure that I'm mesmerized by, and which is Pence, the vice president, who has survived everything so far by, is this part of a kind of genius plan by Mike Pence to become the next president?
Genius is not a word that Bannon, he really frustrated Bannon because Pence would go into meetings and Bannon would say he would go into the meetings and he would take notes. And Bannon said, "That's what a staffer does. He can't, And then Bannon had actually hired Pence, a chief of staff, to tell him to stop taking notes, And B, he said, get him, this is our fallback guy, Bannon says, get him out there, go get him to some foreign countries, anywhere, make him look like a vice president. So Pence is, again, another dimension of moronicness.
I'm still going to persist with the genius line with Trump, though, because he what I find about him, his ability to look at something from a perspective that no one has ever looked at before. Because you talked about, the impending indictment, the kind of the enemies coming in from all sides, and he did genuinely at one point talk about the power the president has to pardon people, and he did genuinely discuss with his staff, could a president pardon himself? To which the answer is, we don't know. Maybe. No one's ever thought that question before. That's the scary thing. And it does make me wonder whether, when the chips are down and everyone is, the daughter's gone and Pence is laughing and the buses are coming and there are gunmen outside just shooting any teacher that moves and it's all crumbling. He will think of something spectacularly, brilliantly obscure that, again, no one has ever come up with before, that gets him off, that gets him, he'll suspend the electoral law. He'll decide that 4 years is actually 6 years in the new math that he's, something will, he'll...
At the same time, not to necessarily arouse your sympathy for Donald Trump, but everybody is coming after Donald Trump. There's not a power center in America that is not right now thinking, how do we bring down Donald Trump? Think that guy. He's alone in his bedroom at night with his hamburger, and everybody.
That's not a euphemism, by the way. It's genuinely, it's genuinely a hamburger.
And everybody is thinking, how do we get this guy? Even the thing, okay, maybe he can pardon himself, but then the special prosecutor has now made a deal, apparently made a deal with the Attorney General in the state of New York because he cannot pardon state crimes, only federal crimes. Yeah. So that the fallback position is, even if he pardons everybody in New York State, they still put him into Attica.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when the chips are down, then, well, actually, before we get to that point, there's just a couple of more figures. What was, as I was reading the book, I was writing down, oh yes, that happened, and then that happened. Things, you forget things. Just with 30 pages to go, Scaramouche appears, and you just think, well, there's a whole novel in itself. So up front, you've spoken to him and interviewed him.
I have.
What is that? And I say that like. What is that person like? That. What was going on? Why was he there? Who thought it was a good idea to have that as something that would somehow improve matters? Get things on it. What's his beef?
So suddenly, so I was with, so Scaramouche is a guy who is a Wall Street guy, and he runs what's called a fund of funds. He's a hedge fund guy, and he runs a fund of funds. And as Bannon pointed out to me, when you run the fund of funds, that means actually you don't run a fund, and you're just going around begging other funds to let you invest in their fund. But then he joins. He starts to work for the Trump campaign, and basically he goes on the business shows to say Trump is terrific, and everybody in the Trump campaign wants nothing to do with this guy. I mean, he's a kind of open huckster. You don't want to get near him. And so then it comes when they get elected, he wants a job in the campaign. He wants a job in the White House, And everybody in the White House is plotting how not to give Anthony Scaramucci a job. And they succeed. Anthony Scaramucci does not get a job. And occasionally, they when it looks close to him getting a job, they offer him jobs that are joke jobs.
Okay.
But he still hangs in there. And come July, Jared and Ivanka become convinced that the White House press office is not on their side. This is not because they're not on because nobody is on their side, and they decide they need someone to defend them, and they come up with the idea again. These are the people. Every decision they make is a bad decision. So bad that they come up with the idea of Anthony Scaramucci.
Yeah. Which would be like the golden mean of bad decisions. If there was a metric measure, the perfect,
And so
it's that.
The day that this happens, I was actually with Bannon. I was having dinner with Bannon, and he gets the call as we're having dinner. And I hear him I hear it. And his end of the conversation is you're shitting me. No fucking way. No. I'm not even gonna. We're not gonna go. This is not happening. And then he hangs up and he tells me, and it's a kind of uproarious laughter, and he goes into a Scaramucci riff, which is hilariously funny. Including, he said, when it looked like when the campaign was really going south, they could not. Scaramucci was nowhere to be found. I mean, he was like, and then Bannon said, so the day after the election night, it had been weeks of nobody seeing Scaramucci. Bannon gets into the office the day after they had won. He walks in. He says the first thing he sees is Anthony Scaramucci with coffee for him.
Jesus.
So anyway, so he's on this phone call. Then we go back to having dinner and this, and then he gets the call again that Anthony Scaramucci has been hired, and I think that was probably the moment in which Bannon lost it, and Bannon decided this is an administration going south. This was not going to happen. Nobody was going to survive this, and he said, he said then Scaramucci is gonna blow himself up in a week, and it actually took 10 days. But did he blow up?
Yeah. And there was a strange, from what I remember, it was a strange kind of Mexican standoff that happened. I mean, you couldn't plot it. You couldn't come up with a better plot, a more farcical plot, because I think it was something like Trump hired Scaramucci, Sean Spicer left because he'd hired Scaramucci. Scaramucci advised him to get rid of Priebus as chief of staff, so he got rid of Priebus as chief of staff. He hired General Kelly as the new chief of staff. The first thing General Kelly said is, "You've got to get rid of Scaramucci." I mean, it's just kind of. And if I'd written that as a plot of a V or a whatever, I'd have thought, no, this is fairy tale. This isn't true.
And you can go on from here, because essentially by the time this was finished, almost everybody who had come in with this administration was gone. So really within the first 7 months, in the time that I was there, everybody went.
Yeah.
And there was no one left, and in fact they cannot hire. They can't replace everybody. So the effect of that has been that now the president's two senior-most advisors are this woman, Hope Hicks, who's 28 or 29, and she was a former junior fashion PR person before she came to work for the Trump campaign. And she is now, I would say that she is the most influential person, certainly in the White House, the president's most influential advisor. Right. And then the other is a guy by the name of Stephen Miller, who was Bannon's, as Bannon says, he was my typist.
Yes.
So these are now the pillars of American political life.
And he's young as well. He's 30
yes,
something.
30, yes.
And now Steve Miller is, I mean, he's scary. He's very scary. There is footage of him as a student saying that janitors deserve no money at the university and because they're just janitors. You know, is that kind of very, very right-wing, I'm just going to say stuff to annoy people. But he kind of genuinely believes it. What's Hope Hicks's... first of all, let's look at her global strategy. What's her global strategy? Vis-a-vis not just the Middle East, but the power play between Russia, Iran, Syria, that dynamic. And then opening out, the obviously trade opportunities now with Brexit. And of course the infrastructure.
I mean, I think it's literally just she's the Trump, not even the Trump whisperer, the Trump buffer.
I thought you said fluffer, but buffer. Trump buffer. To buff
fluffer may be a British thing that I don't understand, but it could be that too. But she is the thing. I mean, so she's the theoretically his media person, and it goes and she's the person who has to put a good face on everything for Donald Trump. So she's the person who had to tell Donald Trump what was in my book.
Did you sit reading it to him every morning? Right. So we have to start wrapping up now. I mean, we could go on for hours because this is just the events of 8 months. We've got a whole other at least 3 years of this. Where's he going to end up then? Where are we going to? If the most powerful people in the world are 28 and 31 and worked in fashion PR and hate janitors, and that's their will we be alive in 3 years' time?
Well, here's the silver lining.
Okay.
All of the kinds of things that you would have to do to really wreak havoc in the world, even George Bush-style havoc, require an amount of concentration and attention. I mean, you really to go to war is hard. And modern war is all about information and data, and when you speak to generals now are PowerPoint people, and in this administration, which has a lot of generals, they come in to talk to Trump, and they come in with reports and PowerPoint and data analysis. He lasts minutes usually. Everyone says, maybe 3 minutes. You're really you've really hit the jackpot. He just can't do it.
Right.
And he can't really marshal the bureaucracy because that's also an information-intensive process. So when everyone around him comes to the conclusion that he can't really do the things that are necessary in this job, he can't really function in it. That's, if you think about it, kind of good news.
Okay. Well, on that very optimistic note, I think we have to end it there. We could have talked more. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface of everything. So there's so many fantastic details in every page there. So we'll wrap up. Those of you who want to come for a signing, stay where you are, and we'll disappear, and then you're going to come back and sign on stage. But thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to meet you for the first time. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you.